So Martin, you've been doing this a long time. Healthcare, it hears a lot of hype. How do you spot the real innovations that are truly meaningful for patients and staff, and sort them out from the hype?
Yeah, no, and every industry is hype. When I worked in the tech industry with Silicon or with Intel, I was in Silicon Valley, and people used to say, the tech industry emits more hype than Hollywood. But I think back to the idea of seeing is believing. Seeing it, does it work? And you just start with one patient and one clinician. Does it work? And you see the reaction of the patient and the clinician, and you can very quickly, the idea of a living lab, like innovation success rates are very low. Like the average success rate of innovation globally, according to, for example, Dublin, 6 to 7%. Digital transformation is a bit better, actually. It's a success rate of 30%. Well, that's still, so 70% are going to fail. But this living lab methodology, because we do a crawl, walk, run, what we saw in Ireland was an over an 80% success rate. And sometimes when you're delivering innovations, actually the value gets created in a different way. So you learn, and sometimes you'll hit a cul-de-sac. You could have a very promising technology or solution, but it doesn't quite work. But sometimes a small shift, or sometimes it needs a major leap. So I think this methodology of using living labs, I'm working with Dr. Monica Suravashli she's a Centre Consus, and she's doing some work on this, putting some artifacts in place. So if you're here in a GP practice or in a hospital and you have a new innovation, what is a structured way to go through these living labs? And we need to be thinking first about the clinical efficacy. We need to be looking at the business case. We need to look at the technical efficacy. We also look at, is there a regulatory impact? And one of the interesting approaches that's been used by companies like Croup and others is they're saying this isn't a medical device. It's actually a well-being device, and it's an aid. And this is actually innovation, and Hooper recently issued with some FDA guidance saying no, you can't do that. But it's always a balance. We want to keep people safe, of course we do, and regulation is critically important. But we also want to innovate and enable innovation. And some of the best innovations, and one of the shifts I talk about in the book is the idea of the shift from producer innovation to patient and clinician innovation, and digital has democratized innovation. And Eric Van Hippel's written a great book called Democratizing Innovation. But some of the best innovations are from individual users or engineers that saw a problem that wasn't being served. So in the future, companies like Philips and GE and Medtronic, they will create great innovations, but more and more they'll come from individual users. So give me an example. Inga Short is a Dublin-based engineer. His fiance, now wife, suffered from IBS. And once a year she used to visit St. James's Hospital. She'd blow into a machine. It would tell her, what's going on in her stomach, the amount of, methane and hydrogen there. So Inga said, I can do better. So he's designed a device that's not bigger than a matchbox. It's called a food marble. Wow. And every time his wife, has a meal, she blows into it, and she can immediately see what's happening, so she can eliminate, the foods that are causing her problems. And she lives much more, and tens and maybe 100,000 of these devices are now being used. And it's interesting, there is clinical resistance. Actually, the most important clinical study, even though it's an Irish firm, happened in New Zealand. And I know I linked up Angus with a leading clinician in Ireland who's really innovative, doing some amazing stuff in another area, but she totally didn't like it, and we went down a dead end. But there are lots of, I mentioned Owen O'Reilly of Allview. He was an individual user, had to wait 6 or 9 months for a skin dermatologist appointment. He said, well, I can do better. I give you so. One of my favorite people in the world is a Dr. Roisin Malloy. She's an engineer. She's not.
I think I've met her.
Yeah, and you should feature her, actually. And she's developed, a non-contact infrared thermometer. And her motivation was, sadly, her sister passed away from cancer, and Roisin became her carer. But her sister was complaining, sleeping at night. She was being woken up every hour or so to have an ear probe stuck in her ear. And Roisin said, I can do better. So one woman, she's transformed the industry, an industry that hadn't seen innovation for 30 years. And she developed this device. And they're so agile. And when I was in the HSE, we had the fastest procurement and adoption decision ever, because with a non-contact thermometer, if you think about infection, 80% of the risk is contact.
Yeah.
And I was able to show this device where you literally point and click, and it's 5 times faster for the nurse, to Dr. Siobhan Nivreen, who's our head of integrated care. In 2 minutes, we made a decision, and we deployed 10,000 of these to our nurses, to our public health nurses. And it's been a massive success. It's a brilliant example of, stay left, shift left, 10x project. It's 5 times faster for the nurses.
Yeah.
It's actually 10% more accurate. But I don't know if you know, but the NHS is the biggest plastics polluter in Europe.
Yeah.
And this completely, every sort of, medium-sized hospital is producing several container loads of these plastic caps. So it completely eradicates that. So it's better for the patient. It's better for the clinician. It's 5 times faster. The business case, they're way more reliable. The, traditional tympanic thermometers are trials, and their trials have shown that are actually about 5 times more reliable, and the total cost of ownership, because they're not breaking down, is much lower. And then the sustainability impact, you're eliminating the caps. So, and it's also, you can now give one to the patient, and you don't have to give them some caps that they have to use. So it's a brilliant example of what we need to do more of.